up with the Americans and were extremely proud of their own abilities. However, the unvarnished truth was that the Westerners were working 16-hour shifts while they were taking pictures, doing maintenance work, or writing diaries, and otherwise twiddling their thumbs. Everyone knew this, which meant that though they were respected as spacemen, they were still the smallest community in the world. They were still not considered equals. At least, he was very sure of that. "So, on with the failure analysis," Felicity said. The mask made her sound like she was speaking underwater. "There are 48 electronic systems in PMA-3, with about the same number of cable connections. The first flames came up the blue groove, so we can at least rule out the locking mechanisms," Roy said. The stocky American was the only wearing a headset and was connected to ground control. The conversation went back and forth for a few minutes until they were startled by a loud bang. The acrid smell of burnt rubber got worse. "We're evacuating," Roy finally said, listening to Houston safety. "No, we're not just abandoning the station," Felicity said. "But ground control has given the order. She's the commander," Max shouted with his German accent. He was upset. "She's up here. Ground control isn't." "So, what do we do?" Adrian asked. "Roy, cut the power to Harmony. It's most likely a short circuit," Felicity ordered. "Dima, get the memory cards out of Harmony. Max, shut down ventilation." Adrian's friend and colleague nodded and quickly pushed off with his feet, slid between him and Roy, and passed through the circular connector between the two modules to pull the massive memory cards out of the walls. "Felicity, we're supposed to evacuate," Roy insisted. He should have acted immediately, according to their training. Adrian had never liked him much, with his gruff cowboy manner. But how someone like him had gotten through the tests was a mystery to him. "I can shut it down," Adrian suggested, as Max prepared the Soyuz for evacuation, which Felicity had just told him to do. "You need the access code." She shook her head and glanced back and forth between her NASA colleague and Harmony, where Dima had pulled out the third memory card and given it a nudge in her direction. Now, like the other two, she flew through zero gravity to join them in destiny. "We should. Immediately," Roy said, his face red. "Protocol," Adrian yelled at him. The brief shock seemed to help because the American suddenly nodded and quickly turned to a laptop on the wall and hacked furiously at the keyboard. "Adrian, you—" Felicity was interrupted by another bang, and a vivid jet of flame shot through Harmony module, through the passageway where Dima was frantically trying to secure the memory cards. He cried out as several fire bubbles, moving like bullets in zero gravity, ate into his leg. Dozens of yellow-red spheres flew past the technical equipment like little demons from hell, heading toward them in the Destiny module. "Shit!" cursed Felicity, lifting the emergency interlock cover off the wall and slamming her fist down on the control. The safety hatch between the modules closed with a hiss, and Harmony was instantly vented. All the air was sucked into vacuum in one burst, and Adrian saw his friend twitch behind the thick portal, the veins in his face now blue. They later learned his death throes lasted 2 minutes, but Felicity didn't give them time to mourn. She shooed them to the Soyuz while she stayed behind. No one else dared object. Shock was written all over their faces. Minutes later, they were seated in the cramped capsule and hurtling toward Earth under guidance of ground control. Weeks later, Roy was released from the program. It was Roy's fault because he hadn't followed orders and thus let the team down. Felicity was revered as a hero for staying behind to keep the station in orbit and repair it as best she could until a multi-member relief team arrived. Dima was only remembered as the one who hadn't made it, who had died tragically. For Adrian, he never wanted to go into space again after that experience, which, contrary to the media reports, had nothing to do with heroic deeds or an adventure gone awry, but with an almost disappointing reality. There was nothing grand about it. In the log, he had noted he had disagreed with Felicity's decision to ignore ground control's evacuation order, although she had been right, because an operator had misinterpreted a data set and believed the fire would continue within a few seconds by a cable running into Destiny. Still, they should have done it. At least then Dima wouldn't have died, and they wouldn't have had to prove with a precious life why there was a rule that the team worked as a unit, even if one individual didn't like a decision. "Hey, are you okay?" Adrian looked up and saw Meta coming toward him from between two of the tall, slender trees. She waddled in her typical manner, which reminded him in a sympathetic way of one of those seals he had hunted with his father in Kamchatka as a youth, when the fiercest snows of winter retreated and made the wide plains off the coast passable.
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.